Hey everyone, it's Mr. Wildboy94. I hope you're doing well today. Today I have another book review for you for a short story collection of scary stories based around this idea of a podcast that's a real podcast. You can check it out. It's basically a kind of a storytelling type thing, sort of kind of from what I understand. It's on Shudder. I do not have this. It's called Video Palace, and the book itself is called Video Palace in Search of the Eyeless Man. I love this cover. It reminds me so much of the VHS anthology horror series cover, at least the first one with the black and white and red cover. It says that the source, or written by, is Dr. Maynard Wills, but that actually turns out to be a character in the story and in the podcast itself. It's actually edited by Nick Bracchia and Michael Manello. I don't know either of these guys. Apparently they're involved with certain things like The Purge and The Man in the High Castle and True Blood and all kinds of stuff like that. I'll give you the names of some of the short story contributors here. I think it's kind of important in a lot of ways. Bob DeRosa, Myrav Devash, I'm not sure how to say that name, Owl, O-W-L, Going Back, that has to be a fake name, a pen name. Bree Grant, Marin J. McCormick, David Ian McKendry, Rebecca McKendry, Eddie McNamara, Mary Phillips Sandy, Ben Rock, John Skip, Graham Skipper, Gordon B. White. Video Palace in Search of the Eyeless Man is about 370 pages long or so. I got into it at first. The more I was reading of it, the more I fell out of love with it. I was really excited because of the cover and because of the story itself. It sounded interesting enough, and it lost me about halfway through. It just started really going downhill. The short stories themselves, I'm going to tell you right now, I would not call all of them bad stories, but they're certainly not extremely engaging. They're certainly not extremely intriguing. I feel like this is one of those movie tie-in books you can get at like Barnes & Noble or something when Man of Steel comes out or Batman vs. Superman comes out, or even when you get a junior novel as a kid for Batman vs. Superman or something like that that's like a Marvel movie or whatever. You know those junior novels, it's like a couple of scenes summarized, not even the whole movie. They have none of the best parts of the movie in it, you know, that kind of thing. That's what this feels like in some ways, but it's also not that because it's supposed to be kind of a sequel to the podcast itself that I think ran for about 2 seasons or so. Maybe I'm wrong about that. The stories themselves are very bland, based around this character called the Eyeless Man, and everybody's different encounters that are also contacting or being contacted by Dr. Maynard Wills, the supposed title writer of the book itself. But it's also a book that's supposed to be put out by a guy named Daniel Carter, who is the apprentice, sort of almost a professor himself, of Dr. Maynard Wills. I have to keep looking over to remember his name, just in case you're wondering what I'm looking at. And Daniel's kind of showing a lot of the notes and stuff that he found once Maynard Wills went missing. One of the big mysteries of the podcast and this book itself is that these white VHS tapes keep showing up, and nobody knows who's creating them, what they're about, or anything. They have weird imagery and whatnot on them that are tied back to the Eyeless Man. Apparently, the Eyeless Man may or may not be able to work through media and come after you through media, whether it be airwaves or static on a TV or just anything digital. And it's kind of it is what it is. I was kind of interested. I had my interest in each of these stories because of that. However, every time you're about to start a new short story in the collection, you're about to have a little segment that's actually Daniel Carter or mainly Dr. Maynard Wills, a new part of his investigation, something else he came across, or maybe a debate he had on eBay with somebody who was very ruthless about getting a TV that he wanted because of whatever reason. There's some interesting stuff in here with those moments. Each of the short stories themselves are kind of just summed off as a person's testimony about encountering the Eyeless Man somehow, and it's not very good, honestly. After a while, it almost has the same formula for every single time because they're trying to maintain the mystery of the Eyeless Man. If you read a Stephen King book or a Dean Koontz book, more than likely you will have an understanding of what that villain is, unless it's a series by the end of that first book. This is not the case. This is straight up urban legend, basically a ripoff of Slender Man most of the time type of feeling to this book, and I don't like that. I feel like it goes nowhere by the end of the book. About halfway through the book, I was of the mindset that this book is just okay. By last night, when I finally finished the book, I was like, this is kind of bad. Like, most of this book is just kind of a giant letdown. Maybe not even bad, just a letdown. Very disappointing. And yeah, the Eyeless Man to me comes across as a little bit of a ripoff of the Slender Man, sort of, kind of. It's a really tall man in really nice clothes. He has no face. That's literally it. And I don't mind if you rip off Slender Man. It's whatever. He's not even copyrighted. He's just an intellectual property on creepypasta stuff. But this feels like a creepypasta type thing, a creepypasta collection, if you will. Somebody just went online, took off these stories that were inspired by Slender Man, rewrote the name as Eyeless Man, published them this way. It feels like that. It feels exactly like that. About halfway through the book, you start having a lot of SJW politics coming into the story for no real reason. I mean, I guess it's kind of there to develop the characters in the short stories, but it kind of just becomes rambling nonsense at certain points, and just stupid, ignorant comments by SJW types. And that really kind of just put me off more and more from how much I already didn't like the book. And all of that being said is not to critique Video Palace as a podcast. I actually think it would be interesting. It sounds like it'd be something right up my alley if I had a chance to listen to it, but like I said, I don't have a Shudder membership or whatever. So if I did, I would totally listen to this first before I read this book, or I would just avoid the book altogether. But maybe if you already like the Video Palace podcast, maybe this is worth picking up. But to me, it seems very simplistic overall in ideology. So I can't sit here and tell you I highly recommend the book, even as a Video Palace fan or whatever. It's just, it has nothing really going for it in this book. The writing is kind of weak depending on who's telling the story. I feel like at one point, the story has just become very dull. I think the first story itself was enough of a quality check to see what you're getting with the rest of the book, and usually that's not the case with a short story collection. You have that first short story, it's kind of whatever, or it might be rough, or it might be the best in the whole book sometimes, and that kind of gives you a quality check of what you're going to be measuring up with by the first couple of stories you read. And this one was a great example, the first story being so rough and so poorly put together and poorly written that I was like, what are we getting with this? Now, usually I try to tell you guys in my short story collections of what my favorite story in here was. There wasn't really anything that I could say was my favorite or even my least disgusted or irritated by type of story. There's not a whole lot of blood in these stories or any kind of really sex scenes or nudity or anything like that, so there's not really a whole lot to tell you about with that either, but it's like, most of the stories were all very weak, very bland. There might be a couple of standout moments, not stories, moments every once in a while in here. But again, the overall wraparound story of Dr. Maynard Wills and Daniel Carter, I actually really enjoyed that part. Those were actually engaging. I wanted to see what else we could do with that. Again, this comes across as a movie tie-in book, and it sucks for that. It's just not as good for something like what I'm hearing about Video Palace on like Reddit and whatnot. Overall, folks, when it comes to Video Palace and Search of the Eyeless Man, I can't sit here and tell you that I really love the book, because I do not love the book whatsoever. But I don't hate it. I don't hate it at all. I just find it very bland and very not what I wanted to read from this. It's amazing how you can buy this and Clown in a Cornfield in the same day, and I'm hoping that'll be a lot better than this was, but we'll see. This was a big letdown for like a $30 book, man, and I bought it brand new too, because I was hoping to be good. It looked really good. It sounded really good. Anyway, guys, what are your thoughts on the Shudder podcast or on Video Palace in Search of the Eyeless Man, this book that I'm holding right here? What did you think about either of those? Do you love them? Do you hate them? Do you think the book is bad and the show is good, or vice versa? I'd love to hear all that down below. And if I had to rate Video Palace in Search of the Eyeless Man on a 5-star basis, I'd give it about a 2 out of 5 stars. I know a lot of the book is kind of a 3-star rating most of the time, especially with the wraparound story. I can't do it. I'd like to give the whole book a 2 out of 5, just because it's very weak. It's not very good, even. It's not really even filled with shock value, you know? There's certain imagery in here, like with the static city, if you know what that is, that's just wonderfully well done. I think that's such a creative, interesting thing I've never seen done before in video games or movies or anything. And stuff like that's really appealing. Again, moments in here are really worthwhile. A lot of other stuff, full stories, that kind of thing, sometimes they run too long. They don't need to run as long as they do, or they're just weak, really weak. They don't have that punch in the gut you really need, or a lot of them all end the same way. Overall, it just doesn't work that well, and I'm really bummed about it because I wanted to love this book. I really did, because of the cover reminding me of VHS and everything else. But even so, what are your thoughts, guys? I'd love to hear what you have to say down below in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. May the Lord Jesus Christ bless you guys today, and goodbye.